Hello
Shall I
everyone.
begin? Yeah.
Hello
So,
everyone.
hey guys, can I go? Hey
Yes,
guys, good morning. Welcome to Serverless Saturdays for the month of May. This is our fourth edition, and I hope you attended our previous sessions as well. You can find them on YouTube, which we hosted in month of March and April. Today for you, we have two great sessions from two great speakers. Uh, and here is Sushit, serverless hero. So Sushit, would you like
yes.
to go next?
Thanks, Karthik. And first of all, I would like to welcome Karthik to our Serverless Saturday. So he's
Okay.
recently joined us, and he'll be taking the initiative going forward with all the communications and things with Serverless Saturday. So Karthik, first of all, a very warm welcome to Serverless Saturdays.
Thank you, sir.
And a very warm welcome to all our audience today. And I hope you guys are all safe. And we hope to give you some informative Saturday, the first half of it, and take something out of it. So a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us today. So before I start today's session, so first of all, I would like to announce that the Serverless Saturdays is an initiative from the AWS user group Tirupati and the Serverless group from Bangalore. And one announcement is we've got a new logo thanks to AWS for creating some really cool icons. And so we have got our new logo. We have still not updated our meetup page yet because of some resolution issues. So I've been a little busy. So I or Karthik, we will be, taking this up and updating our meetup page as well. So I hope you guys like the new logo. Please do let us know. And okay, a couple of announcements with respect to the events that is happening in the AWS world. So first, we have the AWS Reinforce event. So it is going to be an in-person event, and if you guys are somewhere around that particular venue, you probably would want to take a look at it. So I think Karthik has already posted the link over there, so you can just take a look at it and register if you're interested. And we have another event, which is the AWS She Builds Day, which is predominantly towards women in tech, and a bunch of really exciting sessions are coming up there as well. So I hope Karthik, yeah, please do share the link here. So if you guys are interested, please do register over there. And yes, coming to today. So as Karthik mentioned, we have two really interesting sessions lined up today as a part of Serverless Saturdays edition 4 for the month of May. The first is we will be having creating an amazing developer experience with serverless by Sam from Complete Coding. And so Sam is a really amazing community person. He does a lot of content on YouTube on his YouTube channel. We will be sharing the link to the YouTube channel as well in the chat. You guys should really take a look at it. There's some really great content that he creates as a part of Serverless, and you should certainly follow him on LinkedIn and other places. So looking forward to this interesting session. I personally want to, looking forward to the session, especially because with serverless, one thing that a lot of people are not so very happy, I would say, uh, is the developer experience because with serverless, a lot of things are a black box and things like that. So really looking forward for the session. And the second session, we have getting started with AWS Amplify by Abhishek. So Abhishek is one of our team members from Confab, who was who didn't know what is serverless or probably just basics of it a year back, and now he's here as a part of our serverless Saturdays, delivering a session on getting started. And what a better topic to start with than Amplify. Amplify. Uh, I've used Amplify in a couple of projects, and it's really amazing. It does a lot of heavy lifting, and especially if you are front-end developers who always wanted to do backend, then you should attend this session. It shows you the power of Amplify and how easily you can get things done with Amplify. Yes, and the last but not the least, we have our newest leaders as a part of our Serverless Saturdays, and AWS user group. So we have three new people who have joined us, helping us organize. So I would like to say a big thank you to all three of them: Dharmendra Singh, Nidhi, Karthik, who's here with us, and Smile Gupta, who's not joined us as a part of the stream, but I'm sure is in the chat. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for all the support and making sure this happens, and a lot of people get benefited with serverless. Thank you. Yes, and last but not the least, so we have our GitHub repository where we store all the where we sort of maintain all the details about the sessions. So in case you guys want to go back to the previous sessions and want to see what happened, this is the fourth edition, so there are three more from the last 3 months. You can go here and take a look at it. We also save the information about the speakers so that you can probably get in touch with them and ask some questions. And yes, and we will start the repository so that more people get. I mean, the repository gets visibility and more people can get benefited out of it. So that's the introduction from my side. So without any further ado, I'll add Sam to the stream. Hey
Hi
Sam.
guys, thanks for the amazing introduction. That was really good.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Sam is joining us all the way from Germany. And thanks to the pandemic, in one way, we are getting to listen to experts all the way across the globe. And if it was physical, all of this might not have been possible. So silver lining, I would say. But please do stay safe at your homes, and I hope you enjoy. So Sam, over to you. I'll add you as well. Yes. So you can start by introducing yourself to our audience, what you do, and then start with the session. Thank you.
So thank you very much again. So I'm Sam, and I work with I work with myself. I run a AWS and Serverless consultancy called Complete Coding, where we help companies of all sizes make the most of AWS and Serverless through either helping you with some training or reviewing architecture and other things that you're implementing in your company. I've been using serverless for the last, I think, 4 years. Almost 100% of everything I've done has been in serverless. I've seen the good, I've seen the bad. I've seen so many things in AWS change. So yeah, hopefully I'll have some experience that can really help you guys out. As they've also mentioned, I have a YouTube channel where I publish weekly videos on lots of different things, from how to do some really technical things in serverless to some of the more high level like decision making, or at the moment we're doing a SaaS build series on basically how to build a SaaS product completely in serverless. But for now, I'm going to be talking to you guys about creating an amazing developer experience. And basically by the end of this, I want you guys to have a fixed idea of exactly what you can implement either in your own environment or in your work environment, so that your developers have the best possible experience whilst developing serverless. And that's just going to help them build things quicker, build things more effectively, and hopefully reduce the number of bugs going into production. So if I go across here, so yeah, this is just a little bit about me. Kind of already covered that. So what, pardon me, what makes a really good developer experience? So obviously there are a couple of things that developers really do like. They like the development process to be nice and simple, because if it's complicated, then you try and avoid it. Obviously, with serverless, you want to be able to try things out, because until you've tried it out, you don't know if it works. And that ability to quickly just try things, see if things work, and then adapt, that is really important. And then the next thing is reducing the feedback loop time. So the quicker you can make a change, test it, find out if it's worked, and then re-implement an updated version, the quicker you're going to be able to develop, and honestly, the happier you are as a developer. So having the ability to locally host some of your applications and have service mocks that are as realistic as possible are really important factors. Another way you can really speed up and reduce the number of bugs in your code is with testing. And with serverless and AWS, sometimes traditionally testing how these services work might be a bit different, because with the services you're using from AWS, you don't actually have access to that bit of code, but there's ways we can get around that. But when a bug does come up, we want the easiest way possible to be able to go through our code and see exactly where an error is happening, and that will allow us to fix it as quickly as possible. And finally, especially at the moment, being able to collaborate within an environment such as inside your actual editor of choice is a really nice thing to have, and actually VS Code has a little trick up its sleeve for that. As well as what people like, there are things that developers massively don't like. So having to depend on other teams or other groups. So if you're wanting to deploy something and you have to wait because you need to get the DevOps team to spin up a server and configure the IP addresses and all those kind of things, that just slows down the process, limits innovation, and becomes a massive pain in the backside. As well as that, having a complex deployment process where you've got to tick a load of boxes and complete a load of tasks, or even have to work with multiple different teams to manage to get your solution deployed, is just something that you don't want to have to do. Next thing is repetitive work. There's often a lot of times where you do things and it's a lot of just like copy this, paste it here, change 5 variables, repeat the process. And it's boring, it's not stimulating, and it's not challenging to your brain. So yeah, it's not something you want to be doing all the time. Next is documentation. It's something that you have to do in pretty much every project, but obviously manually setting up the documentation, making sure that it stays in line with the code, with the APIs you're building, with the exact objects that are expected and that are replied with, can be a bit of a pain. And finally, project management, the bane of most developers' lives, and unfortunately the only thing on these 2 lists that I'm not actually going to be able to solve for you. So quickly, a little bit about AWS and serverless. You guys probably know, given this is Serverless Saturdays, about serverless, but the serverless framework specifically, you might not have used. So it is a framework that allows you to explicitly define what infrastructure you want to deploy. And you do that just using either JSON or YAML. This is really nice as it allows you to commit it into code or into Git repos. And it means that with that, you can copy and paste that infrastructure into multiple accounts, which is really good for if you've got a multi-environment and AWS account set up. The way it works is it takes all of your configuration and compiles it down to CloudFormation, which, if you don't know, is a AWS service where you can pass in a very complicated set of JSON, and with that, it knows how to deploy your infrastructure. And serverless just makes it easier because you don't want to have to write raw CloudFormation. It's a lot of work. So this serverless framework helps compile it. And there's also a massive community of developers that use it. I've used it in projects with international retailers, with government departments. So it is really well supported. And also because of the community, there's loads of people to ask if you have any questions, but also there is a huge, vast number of plugins which help extend the functionality. So if you've got a use case that you think, oh, it'd be really good if serverless did this, someone else has probably already done it and built a plugin. So demo time. The first thing I want to demo is how easy it is to get set up with serverless. So if we hop over into VS Code, so I've installed serverless globally on my machine, and what I'm going to do is do a serverless create -- template. And now there are loads of different templates. If you would prefer AWS, Google, Azure, then you can define what kind of, basically what language you want to be using. So I'm using Node.js and TypeScript, but there's also Go, Python, just raw JavaScript. And then you need to define a path. So I'm going to call this demo API. And this will just take a second. And what it'll do is create me a new repo and use this template to populate that. So if I now open this file and find demo API, this will just reload. And if I clear this out, we can now look at our repo. So here we have a serverless.ts file, and this is what is going to be used to define basically all of the architecture in this system. Here we have, it automatically comes with Webpack, and here it's saying we're using AWS, Node 14, and then we're passing in some environment variables by default, and then there are some functions. A lot of you might be asking why I've gone with using the serverless.ts over serverless.yaml. And you can obviously build everything using serverless YAML. And most of my videos actually on YouTube use that. But recently I've migrated a lot to TypeScript because you can do things like this. Here I'm just defining a variable, which I'm importing from somewhere else. And with TypeScript, because it's just a JSON object in here, you can do some really cool things like spreading arrays or spreading objects, which just helps clean up your configuration a little bit. So one of the things we said we wanted to be able to do is to test things out really quickly. So to do that, you can just run SLS deploy. And in this, if you run this, what will happen is it will compile all of this. Oh, I've not installed npm, but if you run this after you've installed all your node packages, it will actually deploy this to your AWS account. Luckily, I've actually set up an example beforehand, and I've already deployed this to my AWS account. So if I run SLS info, it will actually bring up the information about my deployed APIs. This takes a quick second. And also in this, I've added a second function because by default, they give you this hello function, which just returns hello. But I've added a second one called get item, where we take an item from the path of the URL. And in there, we then get the item from the item ID. And here we have a set of data which we are querying before returning the item. So as you can see, we have those two URLs. And what I can do is just copy that URL, head over into a browser, paste that in. And as you see, we get the response that has a message of hello, welcome to the serverless world, and then the event data, which is this massive blob. So that is how easy it is to deploy just npm install, SLS deploy, and then anytime you make a change to your code or to add a new Lambda, you can just run SLS deploy again, and it will update that existing set of code. So if we go over to our presentation, and that ticks off the easy development process because, yeah, it was as simple as running one command, then npm install, and the ability to try things out. You can literally, if you've set things up properly at your company, it's a good idea to have an AWS account, which is called like Sandbox, where you have the ability to just try things out. You could create a new API, you could try using databases, try using S3, and there is a huge list of services. So it might be you want to try out using the simple email service. You just write the code for it, deploy it to that development account, and see if it works. So that's the first two ticked off. So next, we're going to be moving on to local hosting. So if I just check out part 2 and clear this. So in here, what I've done is I've added in package.json a new dependency in development called Serverless Offline. And I've also added it to my plugins. Serverless Offline is a really cool tool which, as the name suggests, allows you to run serverless offline. So once you've added Serverless Offline to your plugins, you can go into your terminal and run SLS. And SLS is just shorthand for serverless offline start. And what this will do is it'll take a second, but it will actually spin up a local version of my serverless APIs. And there we go. We have the item, the hello, and the item APIs. And if I take this, head back to my browser, paste that in, and pass an item ID of 0001, we get back the item that I expected. This is really good as I can do all sorts of extra things. So if I call this hello endpoint this time, I get back all of this data. And I might say, this is too much. I only want the message. I can go back to my code, go to the hello lambda, make this a bit bigger. And here we can see that we are using this function called format JSON response. And this is just turning the message, the object that I'm returning, into the right format for Lambda to respond via API gateway. And I'm passing the message and the event. This time I want to delete the event because that was too much data and change this to hello serverless Saturdays. If I just save this, I don't need to do anything else in my terminal because we have TypeScript watching the file. Back in my browser, I refresh the page, and here we have hello serverless Saturdays. And now all of the other data is now gone. This is how quickly you can iterate and update when you're using serverless offline, which is obviously a really powerful thing because it allows you to try things out quicker, fix bugs quicker, and allows you to develop in a much, much easier way. So if I close that now, and what I'm going to do next is first undo the change, so otherwise it's not going to let me change my branch, is move back to our talk. And we've ticked off serverless hosting. So next is service mocks. So these are really important because you want to make sure that your code works with the AWS services. And the one I'm going to use as an example today is DynamoDB, which is the NoSQL database of choice in AWS. And you want to make sure that when you save things, when you're querying, any of those kind of things, that your data is going to work and that your Lambda isn't going to fall down when it works with the real service. The way that we do that with serverless is if we git check out part 3 and clear this, is that I've made a couple of changes to this repo. The first is I've added a get user endpoint. And in here, we get the user ID from the path as we did with get item. But here we're using this thing that I've written called a Dynamo helper. And this is just a wrapper around the Dynamo document client, because I found in the past that the document client, the request syntax can often be 10, 15 lines long, but most of it is just boilerplate. So I've just created a wrapper which allows me to do gets, queries, writes with a much easier format. So here I'm using a Dynamo table, but to define that, if we go down to our serverless.ts, underneath all of our stuff, below our functions, we have our resources. So this has been added in, and we're adding in our Dynamo resources. As I said before, this is really cool, and this is one of the reasons I use TypeScript now, is you can use the spread operator on an object, which means you don't have to have multiple sets of resources. You could have another set of resources like this, and just spread them all into a single object, which is, in my opinion, a lot cleaner than other options. So, oh, there we go. So that Dynamo resources is actually imported from serverless/Dynamo resources. And here you just need to define your table. So here we have a table with a table name. And one cool thing, again, with serverless, and you can do this in TypeScript or in YAML, is you can reference things at different parts of your config. So here, instead of having a table name written in here, I'm referencing it from the custom section, which is where you tend to put things that might change a little bit more. With a NoSQL database, all you need to do is add the ID of the primary key. In that case, we're going to be using user ID. And then if we jump back to our serverless.ts, we can see we have custom, tables, user table, and that is what is the value that is going to get substituted into your table. So that is really cool, and I could just deploy it at this point, and that will deploy with that Dynamo table. But we want to be able to test this offline, because that's kind of the point of this talk. So what I've also added is, if we go down to our plugins, I've added the Serverless DynamoDB local. This is another plugin which allows you to basically host a local version of DynamoDB. There is a little bit of setup that you need to do before this, but it's all really well documented. Once you've got that installed, I could just run it now, but what you need to do is actually say in the custom section how we want that DynamoDB local to work. So we want to run it anytime we're running in development. Some information saying we want to use port 8005, use the memory, and we are actually going to seed this with some data. So here we're saying in development, anytime we're using the table of user table, we're going to seed it with this user JSON seed data, which, if we look at the data, is just an array of objects, and you can have as many objects as you want. With the one thing you need is the primary key that you put into your Dynamo resources, and then anything else that you want. So if we spin up our serverless offline now, SLS offline start, that will spin up. And one other thing I've done in this Dynamo, in the Dynamo helper, is at the top, change the debug. At the top, I've said, if this is running serverless offline, make sure the endpoint is localhost 8005. So every time I run offline, it's using my offline instance. Here we go. As we can see, we are DynamoDB created table my user table, and then we've set up our APIs. What we can do is, again, copy the URL, paste that into our browser, and I think my ID was 1234. And here we go, we get back the user, and that has actually come directly from DynamoDB, which is really cool. The one really interesting thing about this DynamoDB offline or DynamoDB local is that it works exactly as you would expect a DynamoDB instance to work. So if you had a create user endpoint, you could create a user using one endpoint, and then on the other endpoint, you could get that user afterwards, and it will have been persisted. It's not like each function is just storing it in a cache. This is actually running an actual real version of DynamoDB on your local machine, which is honestly really quite cool. And as you can see, we can see that we got a request to get user 1234. And yeah, any console logs that you do inside your Lambda are all logged out here. So for example, if we look at get user, one thing that I'm doing here is console logging out the name of the user table, which we can see just there. This is really cool, and I've actually used this in the past with, I think it was 4 different repositories, each working as a microservice. And with this, we were able to have it all running locally and test the full architecture of a chat platform that now serves, I think it's about 500,000 conversations a month. And I had that all running on my laptop to test out that each of the parts work together nicely. So if we kill that and head back to our presentation, that's serverless mocks. And there are serverless mocks for other services such as S3, but 1 or 2 of them, something like simple email service, you may have to write some of your own mocks, but that is usually relatively simple to do. The next thing is obviously testing and debugging. So again, I'm going to check out my next example repo. Which one is that? Part 4. Clear this. So this is going to be testing. So if I minimize everything and close that out. So the first thing I've done is installed Jest. Jest is a common testing library that I'm sure a lot of you have used in the past. So we have some Jest config, and the only real difference with this is going to be that because we're using Dynamo, we want to be able to actually test against an implementation of Dynamo, as we did with Dynamo Local. So here we're using this preset called shelf Jest DynamoDB, and this allows us to test against Dynamo. We do have to add one extra file, and what this is doing is it's getting our tables from our resources that we added earlier, checking for our Dynamo tables, and then what it's doing is we are getting the properties and we are passing that into that DynamoDB helper inside Jest, so this Jest DynamoDB. So Jest knows what tables there are and what fields to expect, and if you wanted global secondary indexes, they could all be on there too. So that is that. So if I now open up this and run npm test, ooh, Jest is not found. That's an interesting one. So a nice bit of a live debugging. So npm test. There we go. Yeah, always node modules trying to trip you up. So this does take a little bit of time because we are actually having to spin up that local instance of Dynamo, but I'll actually show you the tests that I've written. So for get item, oh, there we go. It's running away. In here, we are doing a before all where we are populating the environment variable and the user table into our environment variables so that we can use them in our tests. I've created a couple of utilities. So I have this test utilities.event generator, which allows me to easily make the test events. I can pass in an item ID and a method of get. I can then validate, once I've passed that event into the handler, that the response is actually a valid API gateway response, because API gateway needs to have it in a very strict format. So I've written these. And by the way, all of this code, all of these different parts is going to be on GitHub. and I'll be able to share that link with everyone so you can clone the repo, have a look through, have a look at the test utilities if that's what you're into. And then here we're expecting the body to match this body, which is exactly what you expect. And then obviously another test where if you don't pass in an ID that they expect, we get a message of no item found with a get user. So this one is actually using that Jest DynamoDB. We can do basically exactly the same thing. The only difference is before all, we need to actually write that data to the database because this uses a different system, so it isn't preceded with data. So we have to manually precede it. Here's a set of data. I'm going to write that to the table, and then I'm going to try and do a get with the correct user ID and a random user ID. And if you saw the output earlier, we have two test suites. Both of them are passed, and all 4 tests have passed, which obviously this isn't a massive repo, and I've not tested everything, but this is a really interesting way of being able to test even against services like DynamoDB. And what's also interesting is that this DynamoDB can be persisted across tests and across test suites. So if you wanted to do some like true end-to-end testing, you could have a test suite that uses an API for create user, then it does a get user, then it does another update user, and then gets the user again. And all of those will actually be able to work together so that you are seeing a consistent and basically a full end-to-end experience tested through your APIs, which is actually really nice as end-to-end tests. For me, between end-to-end and integration tests, they're the ones I use the most because that allows me to cover the most amount of area with the least amount of effort, with obviously a couple of unit tests scattered in there for those little functions where I really need to know that this one little bit works. So back in our presentation, that is our testing working. So debugging, again, hit checkout, part 5, I think this is, yeah. And if I clear this, so this is probably the branch that is changed the least. The only thing that we've done is in VS Code, look at launch.json. And what we've done here is defined a debugging launch sequence. So here we're saying that we've got a name of launch serverless offline. And what we're actually going to be doing is debugging on top of the serverless offline that we were using earlier. So here we're using serverless offline with the no timeout flag because API Gateway has a 30-second timeout. But if you're stepping through things in debugging, you don't want to have to make sure you're finished within 30 seconds. You want to have enough time to carefully look through each step. Here we're still using Webpack, and this does apparently work on Windows. I'm on Mac, so I can't guarantee that right now, unfortunately. But yeah, this has been tested by other people on Windows. I actually spent probably about 4 hours trying to get this all set up when I first tried to get debugging working. And my issue was the mapping. Because we're using TypeScript, we need to have a map between the actual code, so the code in our lambdas, and the compiled and minified JavaScript that comes out from Webpack. So if you're using TypeScript, one little tip is if you look in the Webpack config and find your dev tools, make sure that that is set to source map. This is the most accurate mapping and actually allows this all to work. So if we start by going into our debugger, top left, and launch our serverless offline, what will happen is if we go into our debug console, this should be spinning up. And if we go into our Explorer and look in get item, we've stuck in some of, there we go, stuck in a breakpoint here. And there we have, this is the output from serverless offline, but from inside our debug console. If we do our get item again, because that's where we put our breakpoint, paste that in and use an item ID of 01, we can see that we are jumped straight to the handler. Ooh. And that's not put the breakpoint in the right place. So if we try that again, strange, let's jump into the wrong point. Sod's law, this is a demo, of course it's going to break on me. So if we just close it and relaunch it, this will start it up again. And what we're doing here is trying to get a breakpoint at here. So once the serverless offline has restarted for the second time, let's see if this one works. Doesn't work, there we go. So here we've put a breakpoint at item, and we can see now we've hit that breakpoint. We can look at the event, which has everything from this event. So for example, if you're just trying to figure out what am I getting when someone hits my, for example, webhook, you can trigger that webhook. And then look, you can see what method they used. You could look at all the path parameters. It could be that you're looking for a specific authorization header, but they've passed it in as authorization header of auth instead of authorization. And you'll be able to see all of that in there. And we can see all of the variables that we've defined. So item ID has been defined here and pulled off the path parameters. And one thing I've definitely done more than once is typed the path parameter differently here to where I've defined it in my function. So here it might have been item ID with a lowercase like that. And if we look inside my function definition, which is inside serverless functions, I might have used a capital ID here. And then if we ran this again, then we'd see that the item ID would be null because we're querying on the wrong parameter. This can be done with the get user as well. And we could even go into DynamoDB helper and we could put a breakpoint inside here if we wanted. And what this will allow us to do is, if I go back into a browser, get user 1234, allows us to put this breakpoint here and actually see the parameters we're passing in to DynamoDB. This can be really good on especially like queries where the syntax can be quite complicated. You can just add this and you can see exactly what the format of your query is as it's going into Dynamo. And if you want, you could actually go into the Dynamo client inside AWS and actually start debugging AWS's SDK, which for some of the newer services that have come out, I've had to do in the past and have had to submit bug reports to AWS saying, oh, you've missed this little bit, or this bit of code in your SDK needs a bit of an update. So being able to actually dig into what AWS are putting out is always fun. So if we just kill that and look back at our list, so that is testing and debugging. The next one is team collaboration. So this I'm not actually going to be able to demo to you because I'd need my second laptop set up, but in VS Code, and this is something that anyone using VS Code can do. It's not specific to your to serverless. There's this extension called Live Share, and what this will allow you to do is set up a sharing group and invite some other of your developers, and then they have full access not just to the screen to see what you're doing, but they can actually jump around inside your basically inside your directory, and they can be changing one file in one location whilst you're changing another file in another location. This is a really nice way of actually doing peer programming, and especially over lockdown, I've been able to work with other developers literally from around the world, and be able to like work through a project, or if there's a specific challenge, you can not only just do a screen share, which is good, you can actually like try things out, you can put comments in, you can debug together, which is a really, really nice experience. And if you do full-time peer programming, it is super smooth, as it allows both of you to type if you want, but I think you can also limit who's typing if you're doing the proper peer program switching. So if we move back to our likes and dislikes, dependencies on other teams. As I've shown at the very start, if you are trying to figure out if a functionality works and you have a sandbox environment, there is no dependency on anyone else. You can set up all of your serverless files, your APIs. You can use the services from AWS, like simple email service, or SQS, or any of the other ones. There are far too many to name. And you can just try things out and see if it works. Complex deployment process, as I've shown, all you need to do is run SLS deploy. That's if you want to deploy it locally. I think I saw a question earlier about CI/CD, and I've done this before with GitHub, and also with a service called Circle CI, where anytime you do a change to the development branch, master branch, or the integration account branch, then it goes through, it just runs the CI/CD script that you've written, and that could be running all of your tests. If any of those tests fail, the build fails. And then if it succeeds, all it needs to do is have the correct credentials for your AWS account and run SLS deploy. It's a lot simpler than I've seen a lot of pipelines for CI and CD. So it's really, really nice. So next is repetitive work. So this is kind of twofold. So serverless on its own is great for this, because if we actually jump across into our repo, find our code, and have a look inside .serverless, as I said earlier, this actually does compile down to CloudFormation. And if we look at our serverless serverless.ts, the only things that are actually defining any of our functionality in here are the profile. So here we're just saying we're using Node.js, the functions, and the resources. That functions, if I find that, is this deep. That is absolutely everything that we have inside our functions. And that's it. If we look at our serverless template, this thing is ginormous. So this is 526 lines long and has lots of these very weird join functionalities and those kind of things. So serverless already means that you don't have to write all of this by hand, because that would be an absolute nightmare. Another thing that is really nice with VS Code, and this is for everyone using VS Code again, if I wanted to make a new API endpoint, I'm going to go into functions, create a new folder, call this new API endpoint, and in here create a new file called index.ts. And what I could do is I could go in here and basically copy the bits from here that I like, or I could just type it all out from hand. And I've done this before. I did this for a very long time. But actually VS Code has this awesome thing called snippets. So if you do Control-Shift-P, opens up this menu. And if you search for snippets, or if you have your recently used, there's this configure user snippets. You can then select the kind of file that you're using. So I'm looking for TypeScript. And in here, you have a list of snippets. So I've got all sorts of snippets in here from years of building up these kind of things. So what I want to do is find the TS API one, and this has a body. This is what's going to get pasted in. So if I go back into my new API endpoint and do TS API, I don't even need to do it until IntelliSense brings it up. There we go. I've just written all of this out. I've done the correct imports from the right places in literally 3 keystrokes. And for getting things started, or if you've got something that you repeat a lot, so for example, if I'm creating an interface, I often have a set of fields on this, and this is an object that I don't know the parameters for. So I have this thing called KSS, and that does that. Yes, it's only saved me like 15 characters, but some curly braces, some square braces, colons. It's a lot easier for me just to write KSS than it is to type all of that out. That's a little tip. And if you want to make these yourself, there are really cool snippet generators, which can you can literally just copy your code, paste it into the generator with the key that you want to type, and it will give you the set of, basically, it'll give you this object that you need to paste into your config. And I think you can use this in pretty much any language. So if you configure snippets, there are a very, 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 very long set of languages, and you can set up your snippets so that they only apply to the files that end in the right format. So that is, if we move back to here, removing a lot of the repetitive work. So the documentation is the next one, and this is something that I've actually been working on a bit on my own, because AWS and Serverless allows you to document things with just the serverless file itself is a bit of a documentation. It tells you what you're deploying, but it isn't super user readable for the normal person, or it's not the kind of thing you want to be giving out to your end users. So what I've done is I've created I'm in the process of creating a new plugin called Serverless Swagger. And what this does, if I run SLS offline start, is it actually allows you to automatically generate your Swagger file. So if I copy this URL and head over to browser, paste that in here, here we have my Swagger test. So here I can see that I have a hello user ID and a post. And in here you can see that we have a body that is required and then the different response codes. What I can actually do is go back into here, and inside my functions, I can go and just add a new function. Just copy hello, paste that, change it to goodbye, change that to goodbye, like that, save that, and now run npm run swagger. This will actually just print out, and this is why this is just in development at the moment. It'll print out this object here, which if I copy that, head over into Swagger and paste this in here. Save that and run SLS offline again. What we'll see is that when this spins up, if we refresh this page, we now have the new goodbye endpoint. This is really cool, as I've not had to change anything. I've just added a new function to my serverless documentation, and it's added it to this Swagger. The really, really cool thing is that I've added the ability to have types. So if I look in my functions again, we have the ability to set responses. So I'm going to say in here, we have responses and we have a 200 response. And I'm going to say this is going to be goodbye. And then all I need to do is in my API types, export interface goodbye, some info string, number, save that, save my functions file, and repeat the process. So run my Swagger, and eventually this will be a plugin that will automatically do this process that I'm doing manually now for you when you run SLS build or SLS offline. So you won't have to do any of this manual nonsense, which would be really nice. And if we do SLS offline again, once this is built, we can go across here, refresh the page, find our goodbye, and see that we have a code of 200, and we have the example of our the example response. This is pulled directly from TypeScript. So if you're already using TypeScript and you're defining your interfaces, then you've basically got automatic documentation for everything. And if we have a look at this one, you can make it basically as nested, as complicated as you like. Or in this case, define this as the body that it's expecting to receive on a post. You can also have multiple statuses, so 200, 400, 502, all of that defined in there. So go back to our talk. That is documentation. So that only leaves project management. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, this is just something you're going to have to deal with and learn to deal with on your own, as there are no easy solutions for project management. So what about other languages and services? I've used TypeScript because it's what I use every single day. And this is all possible in your in Go, in Python, in any language that is supported. And services, as I said earlier, there are loads of services from AWS, and some of them have really good mocks. So I know the S3 has one if you want to test your offline S3 functionality, whereas some of them may need you to write some extra little bits of custom logic saying, if I'm running offline, don't actually try and send that email. So the last little bit about complete coding is we are a consultancy at the moment. It's just me and one of my other colleagues, and we help companies who are using AWS and Serverless basically to make sure they're getting the best out of it. We can help with anything from AWS account management and user access, all the way through to solution design. So whether you have an idea that you want to turn into a solution, a serverless project, or if you've already got a serverless project, but you need some help optimizing it, we can help with all of that. So thank you. And are there any questions?
Nisham, that was a really wonderful question. We have quite a few questions your way.
I bet, yeah. Yeah, do you want to fire some up then?
So, so here's a question.
Okay, so the plugins that I use every day are basically the ones I've shown here. So I always use Webpack because in the past I found that with your Lambdas, if you've got loads of Lambdas and they're all getting deployed into every Lambda container, that can get above the limit. So Webpack allows you just to only include the things that are actually required. But one little note with that is I always turn the mode to development, because if you use the production mode and you have a look at the logs, it's like function 0.f at line 1, but like 36,000th character is not defined. It's a really bad error message and it makes it impossible to debug. So yeah, leave the mode to development. I also use, serverless offline, serverless DynamoDB local are the ones that I use basically every day in every project. And then it just depends on what that project is doing. If there's step functions, there's a really cool step functions one. But most of the time it's on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, serverless offline, Webpack, and DynamoDB local are the three that I basically start my projects with.
All right, great. So here's the next question.
Live debugging Lambda functions. I think that's what I just demoed. Inside VS Code, you can set up that that debugger, so it runs serverless offline inside your code, inside your machine, sorry, and then you can put breakpoints wherever you want and live debug it. You can't live debug deployed Lambda functions, which are in AWS, which might be the question, but there are. What you can do is you can use some really smart logging utilities where you put in like console logs, console warns, console infos, and then when you actually deploy it to AWS, it takes that Lambda function, and depending on what environment it's in, it doesn't actually print out the console logs or the console infos and only does like the console errors. But you can always pass in a little cheeky like debug environment variable, which will then just overwrite that and just console log everything out for that invocation. So that's a little tip if you do want to not quite debug, but get more information out of your actual Lambdas that are deployed.
All right, great. So we have a question from Divyansh.
Yep. So I just created a project with serverless.ts is missing. Okay, so are you talking about you used the serverless create with the template? The question would be, which template did you use? So in my example, I used the AWS-Node.js-TypeScript, and that is what will use the serverless.ts. If you just use AWS-Node.js, then it will create a serverless.yaml, and it has the exact same functionality, but it's with a YAML file. If you look at my YouTube channel, probably 2/3 of the videos use a serverless YAML file, but I found that because YAML, it cares about the indentation, there aren't brackets, it's a lot easier to accidentally indent something the wrong amount and be spending literally hours trying to figure out what's wrong with your serverless configuration to realize you just need to press tab on line 37. So I like TypeScript because there are curly braces, there's square braces, things are more explicit. But yeah, if you did use the Node.js TypeScript template and you've just started, delete the repo, try it again, and it should all work. If it doesn't, submit a ticket to the serverless, I guess.
All right. Our next question is from Kishore. Is there a separate plugin to run in debug mode when we use serverless offline?
So when I was looking into this a while ago, there are some plugins out there which can do similar things to debug mode, but as I had in my demo, if I go back to, is this the right repo? No, this is one. So the only thing you actually need to do is in VS Code is add this launch.json. That is everything you need to do. If you've already got serverless offline set up, just, as I said, this code is available in GitHub, and the link is in the presentation, and I'm sure that can get shared around as well. But yeah, as long as you just copy this JSON into this location and hit run, then you'll be able to debug with serverless offline.
Amazing. I hope, Kishore, you got your answer. Next question is from Vinod. Vinod is asking, is it possible to see how much is the memory CPU utilization when I run the Lambda locally using the serverless framework?
Now, this is something I'm not absolutely certain about.
Okay.
Wait, let's just try it out. Actually,
I think it does. It does
That's
tell you
nice.
how long it executed, the billing time. I think it
yeah.
happens.
So once this is spun up, we can try it out. So see if it. Oh, it's because I've got the port in use. So kill this. Actually, yeah. So here, at the moment, it just says the duration of your execution. But I'm sure there'll be a way of finding out the CPU utilization. But right now, I'm not certain of that. But that's a really cool question, actually.
Yes. Our next question is from Naveen. Naveen is asking if any performance or implications of using TypeScript or JavaScript for Lambda development.
My question would be compared to what are you coming from a Java background or a C# background? Obviously, JavaScript compared to like if you're writing in C or C#, I've never written in those languages, but I heard they are optimized for performance. But honestly, for 99.999% of things that you're writing and creating APIs for, JavaScript is going to be absolutely fine. And using TypeScript, it just compiles down into JavaScript. So they run at the same speed. And yeah, as you've seen in some of the API requests, they're coming back in like, some of them are even like for simple requests that aren't using a database or anything. Yeah, sub 10 milliseconds. So if that's too slow for you, then yes. But I think more of the time it's going to be the requests to other services that are going to take time, the queries on Dynamo, the getting files from S3, more, unless you've got a really, really compute heavy use case. But yeah, if you've got a really compute heavy use case, then you can always look at the information you get when you deploy it. As I said, serverless is good to try things out. Try deploying your Lambda, see how long it takes. You can also change the amount of memory that your JavaScript Lambda has. Try sticking it to the max. I think recently it's been up to 6 gigabytes on a Lambda. So stick it to 6 gig, see what happens. But also try bringing it back down and seeing if it does slow it down. There's also a cool little tool out there for optimizing your Lambda memory size. I think it's called Lambda Power Tools. So yeah, if you are interested in like really optimizing your Lambdas, you can use that.
That was a great explanation, Naveen. I hope you got your answer. And this is our next question. Can we leverage a small local development as a part of CI/CD, where I run my tests against a local instance of DDB?
Ooh, I suppose you. So inside CI/CD, when you run that process, it depends on what CI/CD service you're using. In the past, I've used a lot of Circle CI, and when you run that, when that runs, that actually spins up its own little server and then runs the tests on that server. If your tests use the same tests that I've used here, then that will actually create its own local version of that DynamoDB and will test against that Dynamo. If you're talking about having an actual local version of Dynamo on your laptop, but doing a CI/CD process on a different environment, you can actually do that. So if I look inside libs and Dynamo helper, what I've done at the top here is I've got these things. So if it's a test, I'm using localhost 8000. you could pass in some extra environment variable in your CI/CD and say if CI/CD changed the endpoint to be basically you'd have to publicly expose your local database. But yeah, you could change that to be your IP address and expose it your local DB if you really wanted to. And you can also do this if you wanted to in CI/CD test against a deployed database on AWS. You could do that as well.
I have used the marking service once for the CI/CD and the local testing. Did not use the local setup, the DynamoDB, but I used the marking that you also touched upon.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
Amazing. That's amazing. So we have last question of this session from Vinod. Vinod is asking, how can I host a Lambda A locally using a serverless framework and call this from another Lambda B, again using serverless, that is Lambda A to Lambda A. Sorry, Lambda B to Lambda A.
So you've got Lambda A using the serverless framework and call that from another Lambda using serverless. Is that the question? Yeah. So inside the AWS SDK, there is the Lambda setup, and inside there you can do basically Lambda invoke. So you can have one Lambda triggering another Lambda, which is actually a relatively simple thing to do, and is often used when you've got like an async task that you want to run. So it could be you get hit with a request and you know, okay, I need to go and do these 3 different large tasks, but the user doesn't actually need to know about that. So you can invoke those Lambdas asynchronously and then return from the first Lambda with whatever response. And in the invoked Lambdas, you can then go through, do all the processing you need. Another way of doing this, which is a little bit more open, but takes a little bit extra work, is using something like Event Bridge. So inside your Lambda B, you send a message to Event Bridge saying, hey, here's a message. And that message might be trigger Lambda A. And then Lambda A is listening to Event Bridge. And this is really cool because that first Lambda B could be, I don't know, an orders Lambda. So the customer just placed an order. That just says, hey, Event Bridge, I've just received an order. And then you could actually have one Lambda listening. So that could be Lambda A, which is a, I don't know, process delivery request. Or if you want to have more, it could be you have a second Lambda, which is send customer a thank you email. And with using Event Bridge, you can actually have as many of these listening to that one event stream as you want without actually having to change the original Lambda, which, if you look at event-driven architecture, is a really, really cool structure.
I think, Sam, it was more about how do I test it locally. So can we do that?
Okay.
Lambda A to Lambda B locally.
So yeah, you can definitely do that. One way of doing that is if you're using the Lambda invoke, is you can create a little wrapper, and then inside that you can. So inside that wrapper, you say if we are running in a test environment or using serverless offline, instead of using the AWS SDK to invoke, just use like Axios or something and trigger that endpoint.
Mm.
So that's another way of doing that. Or again, just run a command of like serverless invoke function. So there are different ways of doing that, but because serverless offline, you get this. I'll try and see if I can find it. This is offline value in every single environment variable. You can use that for all sorts of things, like anything that you want to act slightly differently when it's running offline, you can do. So yeah, step functions is another one that I've done like this, where I said if it's offline, instead of actually running a step function, just like do a wait and then trigger the other Lambda, which worked really nicely and allowed you to do like very spaced out things, which you'd normally do with step functions, because at the time step functions offline weren't available.
Got it. That's a really interesting way of dealing with the server step functions.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome. So yeah, that's my talk, and yeah, I'll send the links in the private chat to you guys, and then you can share them around, including the GitHub link for anyone that wants to have a tinker with its code. And yeah, feel free to take any of the bits that you like, reuse them, update them, and yeah, hopefully you found it all super useful.
That was a amazing session, Sam. A special mention to you. You've joined all the way from Germany. For us, it's really early there. Like, thank you so much for this wonderful session. Like many viewers, I think will learn and progress from this. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sam. And I certainly have learned a lot from this session, especially with the local development parts. And I'm pretty sure all of our audience have learned a lot. And yes, please do share the GitHub link, especially so that we can share it across and they can take a look at the code and play around with it. So thank you so much once again for joining us all the way from Germany, and we really hope to have you as a part of our future sessions from Serverless Saturdays. It was amazing.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So that was Sam this from the first session. And before we jump into the second session, which is by Abhishek, I would like to show something to you guys. This is about reskill. Hope my screen is visible. Awesome. So, as you can see, we discussed about this the last time as well for all the new joinees. Just wanted to let you know this is Reskill, which is a community-driven platform for upskilling and getting yourself updated with a lot of things about AWS. So this is a community-driven activity, and you can use this. You can sign up. It's a free platform. You can just sign up and you can improve your skills, earn rewards, build network, and get in touch with experts and get your questions clarified. You can write blogs, get it published, and a bunch of things. And above all, of course, you get a chance to get yourself upskilled with a bunch of challenges that is available every week, every month, and there are some special challenges. You get some points, and with points, you can actually go ahead and redeem them to Amazon vouchers. As of today, this Amazon vouchers is limited to the Indian audience, but we have plans to go globally, and you get some really cool badges like this as well. And as you can see, you get a chance to just get yourself upskilled with on the AWS cloud, get some points, and get your really cool t-shirt. So the one that I'm wearing right now, I don't know. Yep, it's this one. Yeah, so get a really cool t-shirt and also get some Amazon vouchers. Again, it's limited to the Indian audience as of now. So from Reskill, we have challenges where we have every month we open a challenge, and every quarter, every week we open up challenges. Apart from that, you also get a chance to connect or discover the community in your place and connect with the experts as well. So we have a bunch of experts across India as of today, and you can just connect with them, ask your questions, and get them clarified. So this is an amazing opportunity. And apart from that, you can always refer your friends, get some points, add your certificate, submit your blogs, and stuff like that. So I think Karthik has already shared the link in the chat section. So please do sign up. and get yourself upgraded onto the AWS cloud. So, so that is about reskill, and we have our next presentation, which is by Abhishek from Confab. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, Abhishek just started with serverless probably a year back, and today he is delivering a session as a part of Serverless Saturdays. So, this is what we want to bring in as from Serverless Saturdays. So, not just sharing your experiences from experts, but also for people who want to get started, not just learning, but giving them an opportunity to share their experiences with the community. So if you guys are interested, please do reach out to us, and we can probably have you on our next sessions. So I'll add Abhishek. Hey Abhishek, how are you doing?
Yeah,
Uh,
Abhishek.
you're on mute, Abhishek.
Yeah, you are on mute.
Okay, sorry, a daily habit. So, good afternoon, Karthik and Sushit. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we are good. Abhishek, thanks for asking. How are
Yeah,
you doing in this current pandemic situation? I hope you're well.
yeah, I'm well. I'm well.
So we welcome you to Serverless Saturdays, Abhishek.
Thank you so much for letting me present today.
So let's get started with this session. Give us a brief introduction about yourself, what you do, what you'll be talking about today.
So, hi everyone. Myself Abhishek, and I'm a backend engineer at Confab Technologies. I mostly work on AWS Cloud. I'm still exploring multiple AWS services, including Lambda, API gateways, and Serverless Framework. And I'm a serverless enthusiast and learning from the best themselves, like Srushit and Dharmendra there. So, uh,
You can start with your session, Abhishek.
Yeah.
okay. Let's get started. So, today's session is about getting started with AWS Amplify, wherein we'll be looking into some amazing features Amplify has to provide. So the agenda for today's session and what we'll be doing is like firstly, this session is mostly intended towards absolute beginners or front-end engineers who don't have a lot of context about back-end development. So we'll be exploring that what AWS Amplify has to provide to front-end developers or absolute beginners who don't have that much context about back-end development, and how they can leverage AWS Amplify to quickly provision serverless development for their project. After that, we'll be seeing Amplify CLIs and, of course, a small demo. So first of all, what is Amplify? So AWS Amplify is a set of tools and services that can be used together in collaboration or on their own. Like you can use a separate service also to help front-end web and mobile developers to build scalable and full stack and serverless applications, which are all powered by AWS, of course. So um, also, actually, AWS Amplify consists of a set of tools. So it contains one open source framework which provides you with the components to develop front end components or back end components. Then there is an admin UI, which is the latest addition to the Amplify ecosystem, which allows you to manage your website content or website configurations through a graphical user interface out of the CLI, and it is very interactive to use. And of course, Amplify console, where you can manage your Amplify project, deployed Amplify projects and their environments and their added configured backends. Also, as I mentioned, there are components, and AWS Amplify is an ecosystem overall. So AWS Amplify actually gives us four things. One is Amplify CLI, Then there are libraries which are used to by front-end developers to embed user authentication, provision sign-in, sign-ups for their websites or mobile applications. Then UI components, which are pre-built UI components, you just have to embed it with your front-end code and you are good to go. And obviously an Amplify console where you can centrally manage your all of the added categories. So this is the ecosystem which Amplify has. This is a high level architecture of Amplify framework. So as I mentioned, it has CLI, console, libraries, components. This diagram lacks one thing, which is admin UI, which is the latest addition. As of last year, it got added into Amplify framework. And along with it, you can see below there are a few categories using which you can configure backends. We'll dive in a little bit deeper. So I gave you a brief introduction about Amplify. So let's dive in and let's see what it has actually to give us. Today we'll be focusing on Amplify CLI, and because CLI is easily and readily available into our local setups, you don't have to go to user interfaces or any other console. So I'll be focusing on Amplify CLI today. So Amplify CLI is a tool chain to configure and maintain your application backends from your local desktop, and you can configure cloud functionality using CLI's interactive workflow. It has a very interactive CLI wizard using which you can easily configure, and it is very intuitive, and any beginner can provision any resource without any help or without any guidance. Also, all the configured resources which will be configured through Amplify CLI are available to customers as infrastructure as code templates, like we have CloudFormation, so which enables us to for a better team collaboration and easy integration with Amplify CI/CD workflow. That's it about CLI. We'll proceed further, and on your screen you are seeing the different categories. So these are all the categories which can be provisioned by using Amplify. As you can see, there is authorization, analytics. There are two types of APIs which are REST and GraphQL. You can host your static web applications, and as of last few weeks, Amplify has introduced server-side rendering also into their ecosystem. So Next.js applications, like modern web applications, can be also hosted on Amplify CI/CD. Then there are serverless functions, of course, and storage. And in the right column, you can see the service providers for that. As you know, so Amplify features are actually organized based on the use cases you need to integrate into your application. So like multi-factor authentication or analytics or serverless functions. And when you configure these features using Amplify CLI or the admin UI, the necessary AWS cloud services, which you see in the right column, gets provisioned for you automatically. So, and this configuration related to those services is persisted into the CloudFormation templates, so that whenever you work in a team environment in a collaborative manner, so that CloudFormation templates can be checked into or pushed into source control, and any of your team member can easily push that template and use that to configure the same resources which you previously developed. And when you add these features to your application via Amplify libraries, like there are multiple modern frameworks like Angular, React, or Ionic, and as of last year, Amplify also supported Flutter also for iOS and Android application development. So you can use those libraries, and these libraries will make necessary calls to the AWS services. So for example, if I want to add Amplify authentication to one of my APIs, and so it will configure Amazon Cognito for me in the behind the scenes, and then when any library from UI will use that proper functionality, for Cognito or for signing up into your application, that particular library will make necessary calls to the Cognito APIs, and it will be all done. Our today's main focus will be seeing API storage, which is DynamoDB primarily, and we'll be testing our APIs locally using Amplify's power also. So without a further ado, I would like to start with the demo now. But before starting with demo, I would like to explain one more thing, which is the team environments. As we know, Amplify can be used in team collaborative manner. So there are two ways to do it. Like you can share the same backend for your project, or you can create separate sandboxes also, so that a particular developer can try out his own things or try out his own features to add to environment. And if that works fine and gets approved, then that can be merged to the actual backend. And this is worked out similar fashion like we use GitHub. So if you want to create a new sandbox, we'll separate similarly like we do in GitHub. We create a branch, we make all those changes and raise a PR. So it's the same in Amplify also. We'll create a new environment. You'll create your features. You'll add or provision some resources. You'll test those features, and you will check out to the prod dev. That was it related to the team environments. Now, let's get started with the demo. I'll open my VS Code. So let me know once you can see my screen. Okay. So as you can see, I'll increase the font here. So I've created one empty folder like SS demo. As you can see, there is nothing here. And from very scratch, we are going to provision all of our resources here. And I'll show you actually how it's done. So before getting started with Amplify, you will need Amplify user with configuration to Amplify console, so that using that user, your project will be created into the cloud. So for that, we'll simply do Amplify configure, which will essentially open up your AWS management console, and from there you have to set up a new user. So if you can see, it opened up my console, and now I'll be pressing enter here. This is very important step, one of the important steps, like where you specify the AWS region, because of some businesses or some project needs different region to deploy their applications or separate their environments within the regions. So for the particular demo, I'll select one of the regions. I'll go with Mumbai, and as you can see, it is asking us to specify the username of the new IAM user. So let's get SS demo. And now, when you do this, it is actually gonna open the IAM console, so that here you can give programmatic access to your created user. So for this demo, I'm giving all the access here, and yeah. So now I'll create user which with the administrator access, and as you can see, for the particular user. So I'll just copy this after entering, the wizard will ask you to give an access key ID. So I gave it, and now I'll copy the secret access key and add it here. So now it is asking me for a profile name to set, and yeah. So now, as you can see, we have successfully set up our new user, which will be used to provision your resources or create a new project. So the next step after this is we want to create Amplify project. So for creating a new Amplify project, you just have to do this command like amplify init, and it will initialize your process to create a new project. And please keep an eye on the folder structure. So it is going to add all of the folders. So I'll give a project name, and it is this simple. Like you just have to follow this wizard, and it will give you all the capabilities. So it will ask you for the environment name and default editor. So after giving a project name, you can easily select defaults. So all the defaults I'll be getting selected, and yeah, now you can see it is provisioning a cloud formation template for us, and it is going to take some time to spin up the resources, and it is asking us with using which profile you want to create this. So I'll select the profile which we just created. Yeah, you can see that profile got created into local, and I'll use the SS demo. And the process to provisioning your resources will get started. As the wizard says, adding backend environment dev to AWS Amplify. So as you can see, the create is in progress, and it will create all of the basic templates and Amplify folder structure for you, and initialize your project into the cloud. Okay, so now as you can see, it says successfully created initial cloud resources for deployments and initialized a provider successfully. And now if you see here, all the Amplify related folders got created here. Now we will come back to this folder structure, and I'll explain you all of that. So before that, we'll get started with adding a resource to our project. So I will be quickly adding a REST API. So for adding any API, you will first use this command like amplify add API, which will be a walkthrough wizard which will help you to provision your resources. So as you can see, I'll be selecting REST, and I'll be giving a name to our project. And as you can see, it is asking me for a path. So I'll give a path which will be added to our API endpoint, and it is asking us to create or attach a Lambda function. As we don't have any Lambda function already provisioned, as we are doing it from scratch, we'll create a new Lambda function to attach to this API, and we'll give the name also. It is asking us to use a runtime. So as of now, these are the different runtimes Amplify allows: .NET, Go, Java, Node.js, and Python. So I'll be going ahead with Node.js. And as you can see, there are 4 options which are essential and functional templates, which will automatically give you a boilerplate code to provision your API. So I'll be selecting crude function for DynamoDB. It also provides hello world a template, which is just a simple plain hello world template, Lambda template. Then there is a Lambda trigger. Then there is serverless express.js function, which is also integrated with API gateway. So I'll go ahead and create a crude DynamoDB data source. So as we have selected a function for DynamoDB, we'll definitely need a data source, and the wizard is asking if you have already provisioned DynamoDB table or not. So as we started from scratch, we'll be creating a new DynamoDB table, and now you'll see how easy it is to create a DynamoDB table and through the CLI. So I'll give a name for our table. And now this is time to add columns to the table. So you can also add columns, and you can provision the whole table from here only. So I will create 3 columns. One will be ID, and it is asking us for the data type to choose. It is that simple. You can easily select it as a. So I'll select ID as string. It is asking for if you want to add another column. I'll be adding one more column named as title, which will also be a string, and one more column for storing our to do, which will also be a string. So I'll select no. We are sufficient with 3 columns, and now this is asking us to choose a partition key for the table. As it is a document database, so you'll need to select one partition key, and it is asking to if you want to add a sort key. So I'll select here no, and it is asking us for adding a GSI to your table. So what GSI is, if you want to scan table, your DynamoDB table with other column, like as we know our primary key is ID, but you want to search throughout your any of the columns or any of the records through your DB, you can use GSI, and for now we don't need it, so we'll skip it and we'll go further with defaults. And it is asking us to configure advanced settings, which is related to the Lambda layers, scheduled recurring of Lambda invocations and all. So I'll be selecting none, and I'll select yes here. And now it is asking us to if you want to restrict API access. So this essentially uses Cognito, and which is not in the scope of the demo. So I'll select no, and it is asking for if you want to add another path. Like we have already provisioned a path which is slash to dos, so we don't need any another path. And now if you'll see, the provision is done through all these questionnaires which Amplify CLI wizard asked us. It was this easy to create a table or DynamoDB table or Lambda function or API. So now we'll go to this backend folder. Now you can see there is a folder named as API, function, and storage. In API, you can see these are the CloudFormation templates which automatically get generated and provisioned for us. And this function, which I'm gonna come later, and the storage also same. All the templates got created here. So now let's get to the function, and as now we want to see our API. So I'll reduce a little bit, yeah. And now you can see an index.js. Actually, it uses AWS Serverless Express to expose your event and context, which is coming from API gateway directly to the your function. And as we are using Lambda proxy integration. Those of you who don't know, I'll give a brief about that. So Amazon API Gateway Lambda proxy integration is a simple method to build an API with a setup of single API endpoint. Like we did, we just had slash to dos as our endpoint, and the Lambda proxy integration allows the client to call the single Lambda function in the backend. As we will be seeing, so I'll go to app.js and I'll show you the auto-generated boilerplate code. As you can see, it has already provisioned all the dependencies for us, like AWS Serverless Express middleware, which is used to expose your event and context to the function. Then it is already configured a document client to interact with DynamoDB. All the variables and all you can see, sort keys, primary key names, user IDs are all already created for us. You can see the course method is already provisioned for us, And below, if you come, so now you can see a very pretty way they have provisioned all crude methods for us. Now this was the get method to get our resources. Similarly, all 4 methods are provisioned for us. And now what we are going to do, so we'll modify this boilerplate code a little bit, and we'll try to test our APIs. Okay, so and okay, so let's try to add a to-do to our DynamoDB table first. So this is a function which was auto-generated for a post method. Okay, so as you can see, these methods are there, and these are user ID present. Validation is actually for the people who are using Cognito in their APIs, and this can give you a context about who is the person accessing the API, and you can, based on that, you can take a decision and put the user ID into your table also. But as of this demo, we don't need this, so I'll go ahead and remove that. So these are the parameters which we are going to use. So table name, as we saw, already provisioned for us, and a body it will receive, and it is simply gonna put the items into our table. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and create an method. Like if you see, there is an event.json which is already present in the function, and this is essentially to test your APIs locally. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and delete this. We'll create a dummy event for our app to test, and we'll see if this works or not. So here I'm passing a method which we are going to try, and we have to give path for that particular thing. So the path will be to-dos, and now we want to give body. Okay, so now this body I'm passing it as a JSON string, so that we don't need to stringify it in here. So what I'll do is I'll quickly give an ID, then we'll give a title to our to-do, and at last we'll add some to-do here. Yeah, so now how this will be invoked is there is a command using which you can locally test your Lambda function. So you can just type amplify mock function and our function name. So in our case it is to-do Lambda. So I'll hit enter, and we'll see if our data gets created or not. So what this essentially does is it actually tries to mock the behavior which actual client will do. Okay, so before that we haven't pushed our resources. So after you provision these resources using Amplify init or Amplify add categories, you will have to push this code to Amplify. So for that you just have to need Amplify push, and this will start creating our resource in cloud, and then we can use. So before testing I forgot to push this, so we'll do it now. And now as you can see, it will show us the current environment which we are in, then categories which we have provisioned locally, and the operations, what are we going to do. So now it is, as it is our first push, so it is saying create. Now I'll hit enter, and it will start pushing everything to the cloud. Okay, so updating resources in cloud, this method is going to take a little bit of time. So I'll quickly walk through in the meantime with these project files which got created. Okay, so if you go to team provider info.json, so what this file essentially contains is, for the particular environment, all of the details for AWS Cloud Formation template and resources which are going to get created uh, can be seen here. So it's a central place to manage all your cloud formation resources. You can see there is a region, there is deployment bucket, there is Amplify app ID. Then what are categories we have added into our Amplify project. As you can see, our to-do lambda function is already in this file. Then if you go to a particular folder like storage, so in that you can see specific details only about the DynamoDB table, which we have provisioned, and all of the details regarding that which function has uh, access to that, everything you can see here. So by this way you can easily check on what your application is using, what are their policies and all. And for function, as you can see, there is a simple package.json, and if you want to add some external packages and perform any transformation or your APIs, you can easily use that and push that as well, as it is a simple lambda function. And for APIs also, you can see all the API params are got provisioned for us. You can see the path, lambda attached to it, the privacy for that. If we would have been used cognito or any sort of authentication, it should have been showed as false. So you can see all of the roles got created here. And so these were the basic folder structure for the projects and sources it got provisioned. So all are the cloud formation templates. And in the meantime, I'd like to show you how this actually looks in console. So I'll move towards the region which I've created user in. I'll go to AWS Amplify. And as you can see, SS demo, the name of our project, got created here. And here, this is the Amplify console where you centrally can manage all of your application. You can see categories. As you can see, there was only one environment. And you can provision front-end environment also using source control methods. And as we have provisioned backend environment, so as you can see, so many of the environments, whatever environments you'll add, you can see it here, and you can edit them. As you can see deployment status also, as it says deployment completed. And now if you go to the CLI, it will readily give you the API endpoint which got created. And now we can first we'll go to DynamoDB table to see if it got provisioned or not. And as you can see, a to-do table which also got created for us with all of the as you can see, there is an ID which is our primary key. So now I'll try to test our API post method. And now what it will do, it will fetch the event.json file, and it will try to create this to do into our table. Now you can see it is asking us for a event JSON. Now we'll hit enter, as there is a default path. Okay, so we have got an error. So one or more parameter values were invalid, seeing the key ID in the item. Okay, so I'll quickly go ahead and I'm going to try this again. Now, if you can see, we got 200 and post call succeeded as an output. And now if we go to our table and refresh this, you'll see a new to-do got created. And it used our actual deployed table to do so. So you can test your applications this way by using Amplify only. As we have tested this, let's try to fetch that to-do which we already have created. And so this is the get method which has already provisioned us for listing the objects, and I'll go ahead and delete some boilerplate code which is mostly for authentication purposes, and as we don't have any authentication in our table. So I'll go ahead and remove the key conditions also, as we'll be using a simple scan operation here. So I'll simply change it to dynamodb.scan, and I'll remove hash key path. So I'll be just giving a simple path, and we'll try to fetch the item. But for that, again, you need to change the event.json somehow. So now this method doesn't need any body, so we'll remove body and headers also, and we'll just change our API path to get, and we'll simply try to invoke it again, and it should give us the created to do in our database. As you can see, we got status code as 200, and inside body we have received our to do which was created in this DynamoDB table. By this way, by just changing path and HTTP method, you can easily test your applications from here, from CLI only. And let's try to test delete method also, and I'll just quickly change this method to delete. I'll give a path parameter also, so that, and I'll pass ID of the particular to do to, so that we can delete that particular ID. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and sanitize our delete method also, because it also has some validation checks for authentication which we don't need, and I'll simply remove that, and that object is also not needed. Okay, and now as we are passing our ID into our params, so we need to access these params here, and I'll just quickly get it from request. ID. Okay, so this particular ID, which what we are giving into the JSON, will get deleted from the DynamoDB table, and I'll try to invoke it again, and we'll see if now, as you can see, we already got 200, and our delete call also got succeeded. And if you see now here, when I refresh this, our to-do is gone. So it's successfully removed from our database. So this is how a simple REST API can be used within integration of API Gateway and DynamoDB. And it was a very minimal code, and you just have to make some enhancement according to your use case, and you have to transform request and response format of your application, and you can simply use the given boilerplate code, and you can quickly get up and running with a simple REST API endpoint within few minutes. And as I've shown you the testing also is very easy using the provided event file. And if you can see now, I'll show you one thing. I'll refresh this page for Amplify console, and you can see now some categories got added. You can see, and you can edit your backends also from here. You can pull this particular environment in your local machine, and you can see what all APIs are got created, what file storage is associated with your application, and all of those things into this console. So that's why this console is a single place to manage everything. And now, one thing I wanted to show you before we end our demo is, as I've told you, you can configure a different environments also into your application. So if you want to add a separate environment for your project, you can simply do amplify and add. It will create a new environment for you. Like if you want to separate dev staging or prod environment per se. So as you can see, it is asking us if you want to use existing environment or not. So I'll say no, and it will ask for a new name. So let's say I gave a name prod, and it will start provisioning the resources for our prod environment. And you can use your same user, and it is exactly same process which will just initiate the new environment. And if you make any change to dev environment or any environment, and you have to get it to a particular environment, let's say for example you want to develop something on dev environment, and you have to get it to prod, then you can easily do that also with a single push. Now if you can see, your project has been successfully initialized, so our new environment got created. And if you see, by using this command, you can easily see a list of your environments in your particular project, and the asterisk sign shows us which environment we are currently in. So now we are currently in prod, and there is one command which helps you to know your resource statuses. So if you do amplify status, you can easily see the status of your environment prod. And if you remember, we have already pushed these changes, and still there is a create operation it is showing us. This is because our prod environment doesn't have resources provisioned for us. Our dev environment has. So if you want to push this to cloud, you'll simply need to do Amplify push, and you'll be good to go. And it will provision you another cloud environment, a separate sandbox. And if I go here in the Amplify console of my account, so now you can see earlier there was just a developer environment, dev environment, and it had all three categories: our DynamoDB table, our function, and our API. But here, this is the newly generated prod environment, and as you can see, the status as deployment is in progress. And but you see no enabled categories, because these categories were not created for this prod environment. That's why we did Amplify push again, and we are provisioning resources for our Amplify prod environment. And this is how you can easily separate your environments, and you can feature wise differentiate them into your own sandboxes. Let's say we have 3 users in our team, and you want to develop separate features. So you can by using this you can create separate sandboxes also for developer 1, developer 2, or developer 3, and they will create their own features. And at last you just have to check out into the environment, the target environment in which you want to deploy your feature. And it is as simple as Amplify push, Amplify and checkout dev, and it will get all of your resources developed by all 3 developers into a central environment. And it is a sort of a version control system for Amplify. So there are only 2-3 simple commands which are mostly used. There is a command Amplify add. That command you can use to provision your categories, different categories like API, functions, analytics, then authentication. You can use Amplify add auth, Amplify add function like this, and you can follow the wizard, which is very intuitive, and you will be good to go with your resources. And there is another command which I told you, Amplify status, which shows all of your status and status of your current resources. Are they going to update or create, or in which environment you are? And there is another command, Amplify env list, using which you can see your environments provision for the single project. Now you can see the REST endpoint it gave us, which has prod in it, and this resource is inside prod. And if I go here, you can see deployment got completed. And if I refresh this page, you will see all those 3 categories got added for prod also. So it is this simple to, you can set up multiple environments using Amplify. If you want it into different regions, as I've told you in a very first step, while configuring Amplify project, you can simply select any region while configuring. As I've chose a Mumbai region here, so you can select that particular region you want to deploy your environment in, and you can simply follow the next steps, and it will create your environment into that particular region. And now, if you want to remove any particular environment, let's say, if you want to remove a developer environment from your project and you are currently in prod, you can simply use the command Amplify env remove dev, and it will remove that particular environment for you. And this is a very recommended method to do it from central place, as there are multiple resources provisioned for your project. And if you go do it from AWS console, it is very difficult to you to find each resource and delete it separately. And so using this method, you can easily delete all of the resources. It will clean up all your resources files inside your cloud account, and you'll be good to go. So you won't miss any resources exhausting your prices. So the deleting resources will take few minutes. There are only two things which are mostly going to take some time so configuring a resource from scratch, uh, for which we use Amplify push. It is definitely gonna take some time to provision all of the resources separately, and similarly deleting resources from picking up all the resources you have configured as a part of this project, and it will delete everything. So this demo also was intended towards beginner who don't know how we can configure projects using Amplify, or they didn't know Amplify. So this is how you can use Amplify CLI, and you can easily configure your projects. And these simple endpoints which Amplify provides us, you can directly use it into your front-end applications, and your full stack project will get ready. And as you can see, it has successfully removed that particular environment from the cloud. And if we now do Amplify and list, it will just show us only a single environment, which is prod we left with. And here, if I refresh the Amplify console page, there will be just prod environment remaining. So that was all from the demo perspective, and I'll quickly get to the slides again. Let me know once you can see the slides again. Okay. So now, if you have any questions, you can ask, and we'll be moving towards closure.
Karthik, I think we are on mute.
Thanks, Rushit. Hey, Abhishek. That was a really nice session.
Hey.
I mean, the viewers are loving it. We have
thanks,
a couple
man.
of questions for you. Yeah, it was really great.
Okay.
So we have a couple of questions for you that I'll be displaying now.
Sure.
This question from
So
Pushkar.
how do Amplify features work with AWS cloud services? Okay, so as I mentioned in one of the slides, it actually provisions them for you. So let's say you add one API into your project, and that API behind the scenes will be calling either API gateway if you are developing a REST API, or either it will be using AppSync to provision an GraphQL endpoint for you. So those are use case specific. So if you want to add authentication, so it will behind the scene provision Cognito user pool for you, and similarly for all of the other categories, it will provision that particular AWS cloud service based on the feature you want to include into your application. I hope that answers your question, Pushkar.
Yes, Pushkar, I hope you get your answer from that explanation. Our next question is from Praveen.
Okay, so how to set up multiple environments in Amplify? Okay, I guess I have covered it in the last. So as I've told you, you can easily create your environments using Amplify and add. You can provision many environments as your use case. You can deploy multiple different configurations for each of the environment sandbox you have, and that will create a separate sandbox, and you can try out everything. It won't conflict with your another environment. So I don't know if you have seen these last few bits. So I have explained the exact same into the last bits of the demo. So yeah.
That's great, Abhishek. I guess Pushkar has asked something again in the comment section.
Okay, so difference of AWS console and admin UI. Okay, so AWS console is not related with the Amplify as per se. AWS console is just to manage all of your services, your AWS account, your AWS cloud account, and you can see what resources are being used and all. But admin UI is specifically related to AWS Amplify, which is a graphical user interface using which you can manage your application. You can create schema, you can create different DynamoDB tables from that, you can provision your storage from there. So it is just a similar analogical thing like we have Amplify CLI. It does same thing, but just using a GUI, a graphical user interface.
All right. I hope, Pushkar, you got your answer. So we have a last question of this session. It's from JB Kani. How to read a MP4 video from S3 and play on web application.
Okay. So I think you can do it via Lambda functions only. As I've shown in demo, there was a DynamoDB client configured there, and as you have noticed, there was AWS SDK also, which was already there. So what you can do is you can simply leverage AWS SDK to connect your Lambda function with S3. You can fetch the video from there in any format, like whatever you want, and you can simply pass it through to the front end through the response of that particular API. So that's how you can do it. There might be another ways also. So this is the way if you want to do it through APIs. So I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, Abhishek, they are responding. They are thanking you for clarifying their doubts. And thanks for this amazing session. And Sushit, would you like to go next?
Yes. So thank you so much, Abhishek. It was a really informative and insightful session. I think for people who are getting started with AWS Cloud, Amplify does provide a very easy path, especially with the way the framework is built, the CLI in particular, where the CLI just asks you a bunch of questions, you answer it, and you have your basic application up and running in just a few minutes. And I think with the demo that you have shown, it's pretty evident that it's one of the go-to ways of getting started with AWS and Serverless. So thank you so much for the insightful session, and we hope to have you in more sessions, upcoming sessions for Serverless Saturdays.
Yes, definitely. And I had fun demoing this, whatever I have learned throughout the past few days in the Amplify space. And I'm looking forward to explore more, and hopefully we'll get some other next session, next Serverless Saturdays edition also, and we'll explore on Amplify more and focusing on full stack serverless application development. So thanks for the opportunity to let me present in Serverless Saturdays. I'm very glad. And thanks for all of our viewers who tuned in on Saturday morning. So that's appreciative.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. Okay, so let me just. Okay. Thank you, Abhishek, and thanks to everyone who have joined us today as a part of our Serverless Saturdays Code edition. So let me do a last thing, as always. Let me just share my screen. Yep. So this is our GitHub repository where we are maintaining all the resources for Serverless Saturdays. So if you guys are interested, I'll be updating the resources from Sam. He's already shared it and I've already put it in the chat section. From Abhishek as well, we'll get his presentation and his demos GitHub repository and add it up here. And we'll keep updating this. So Please do star the repository so that it benefits a lot more people and gets suggested. And last but not the least, so if you are interested in getting us speakers for specific topics or sections, you can do that by either emailing to one of us. The email IDs here, or you can go to this link, which I think Karthik will be pasting in the chat section. It's a Google form. You can just go ahead and fill a bunch of questions. If you're interested in speaking, you can go ahead and propose a topic, or you can just reach out to us. Or if you're interested in understanding a specific, uh, technology in serverless, you can just reach out to us. We'll try to find speakers and get people for the same and get it as a session. So thank you so much for everybody who have joined our session today. I hope you had an informative Saturday, and please do stay safe and stay home. And I hope someday we all meet in person.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.